Hello, and thank you for joining Data Endure for our June Tech Talk session. As always, I am joined by Shaheen Peruz. I am Kirsten Burke, and we are absolutely delighted today to be joined by John Thompson, who is the Global CIO of Reiter affiliated companies, better known as RAC. Welcome, John.
Thank you, Kirsten. It's nice to be here. Nice to chat you and Shaheen again.
Good to see you and have you.
What better month? What better month?
Go ahead. Go ahead, Kirsten.
Don't you love Zoom? I was just going to say, what better month to have a global producer of berries join us than in June, when we're all about the strawberries and the blueberries and the raspberries. John, you've got a great story. You've got an amazing company, and we're just delighted to have you join us today.
No, thanks. And this is a good time of year. Berries are good for us in general, but they're definitely good at breakfast, lunch, dinner, and snacks in between whilst we're all working from home, right? So go out and buy the Driscoll's berries. That's how a berry.
There you go. There you go. Well, John, we've been engaged with you and RAC for several years now, and just love having you guys as a customer. And you've got a very interesting story just around your company, your brand, your global transformation activities, and really how security came to play a very important part in that. And so we'd love to just have you spend the first couple minutes just talking about you, your role, the company, and then we'll take it from there.
No, thank you. I'd love to do that. So again, thank you for inviting me this morning. It's great to be able to participate in this chat. And I am very excited to share cybersecurity journey over the last 18 months. As Kirsten said, my name is John Thompson. I'm fortunate enough to be the global CIO for RAC, which stands for Reiter affiliated companies. In September this year, I've been here for 2 years. And I sincerely say this, I've never enjoyed my job so much as working for RAC. And anyone who checks me out on LinkedIn, I've traveled a fair amount, and this has to be probably the best culture I've worked in ever. So it's wonderful. Part of that is we are a family-owned business since 1868. It's owned by the Reiter family, and RAC are proud to be the largest fresh multi-berry producer in the world and the leading supplier of all of those fresh berries that you mentioned earlier, Kirsten: strawberries, raspberries, blueberries, and blackberries in all of North America. Your viewers will know our brand. It's Driscoll's. So RAC are the farming arm, or predominantly the farming arm of that Driscoll's brand. So all of our berries go exclusively to one customer, which is Driscoll's, and you'll find those in the shop front. We have a mission for the relentless pursuit to delight our consumers. So it is all about quality and the taste, in particular, of those berries. And we like to enrich the lives of our employees and the communities we work in. So really giving back to the local communities, whom we get a lot of those harvesters from. And currently, we have operations in Europe, Africa, Canada, US, Mexico, Peru, and China. At our peak, we can have over 30,000 employees, and peak is kind of these last few months that we've been interested. So with those 30,000 and the journey that we'll talk about in a second, we have a significant cyber security footprint or threat, I suppose, to manage now, given that digital footprint that extends across all of those geographies, but all the way into the farms in each of those geographies with those harvester applications and some of the IoT devices that we have deployed. So it's a very exciting space. Agriculture is certainly not dull and boring. It's very much involved with technology.
John, one of the things I've spent battling for the last 20 years of my career is the old school notion that you can't go wrong if you pick Big Blue. So you pick one of the giant players in the industry, and they're going to be, you won't lose your job. They're going to do you right, and they'll take care of you. And I've spent my career trying to prove that wrong, and I feel like I've accomplished that over the last 2 decades. Can you talk a little bit about your journey with us specifically, because we were not the biggest player that was in front of you as we were going through the cycles, through the sales cycles. And you ended up selecting us as your partner. Can you talk a little bit about what that meant to you and what your decision process was around the type of company you were looking for and why you selected a company like Data Endure?
Yeah, well, let me start first a little bit just before that in terms of that why security is so important for us. When I joined nearly 2 years ago now, we did have a security smattering, but based in the infrastructure team, and the guys were doing the best job that they could possibly do. But as we decided on the strategy with the executive management team in terms of that digital transformation and bringing a lot of those applications to the front line, it became clear and paramount that we needed a much better security profile and increase our maturity very, very quickly. So with that in mind, I think my journey with Data Endure started a few months before I actually started with RAC. I attended a seminar and I met some of the Data Endure team at that seminar. They obviously left an impression in my mind because at the point that we decided we needed to go out there and look for a potential partner, Data Endure were on the list to start with, as were some of the big boys and girls in town as well. Shaheen, you know, it's kind of like an insurance policy, right? If I go with one of the ones, the board and the exec team goes, well, at least you tried your best, kind of. That's not always true, and certainly at RAC, I mentioned that culture that's really important to us. And we were looking for a company that mirrored our values and our culture. And so I think some of the conversations that we had, the initial conversations she had, it sort of demonstrated that Data Endure did have the end customers in mind. So for us, it's our end consumers, but the communities and our people. You're a smaller family-owned business as well as we are. And I think, you know, through those discussions, it just hit that tone that, hey, this is a kind of company that we'd like to work with. So we did do our due diligence and a number of other partners as well. But I think if I would sum it up in my mind, I wanted a company with a smaller scale. So someone where we would be recognized and we're not just another customer or another part of their revenue number. I wanted executive connections in case I needed urgent attention. I wanted a cost-effective solution that provided all of our operational and technical requirements. And I wanted, and this is really important, I wanted a flexible arrangement initially, because at that point in time, we hadn't RAC appointed our head of cybersecurity. So I needed to give that person, whoever that would be in the future, the flexibility to make that final decision around our partnership with Data Endure. And of course, we went through all of that, and Data Endure, we signed a 1-year contract with you at the time, and our cybersecurity lead joined, Hugo, and he's worked with you very closely now for the past 9 months, and I think, you know, the signing of a new 3-year agreement sort of is testament to the working relationship that we've developed over the last year.
And it's I would say that for us, it's reciprocative in that we love working with people in a similar culture and trying to accomplish, you know, the key here is for us, it's what we do isn't rocket science. It's important to get all the right pieces and parts together and integrate them and make sure you're looking at the right telemetry to find the bad actors. But it does take time, and it takes you away from, you know, what's core to your business and what differentiates you from your competition. And, you know, we equally have tried to differentiate ourselves against the competitive landscape here. And to your point, we thank you for the renewed confidence in our capabilities and our services, and to help you globally secure your platform.
Let's talk a little bit about that, because John, when you started out the conversation, you know, you joined RAC with a very specific mission and goal in terms of what you were going to do across this global landscape. And you had mentioned that cybersecurity kind of became front and center to you as you started, you know, peeling the layers of the onion. Not to bring a vegetable into the mix, but there you go. So, you know, talk to us about what was going on. And, you know, you're a very distributed organization already. And, you know, I'm sure with what we see from all the threat vectors out there today, you know, that's a big deal for your business. So tell us a little bit about what the challenge looked like.
Look, I think you've hit the nail on the head. When we talked about it's not our core business. Our core business is to grow the best tasting berries in the world, and that's really our focus. So in terms of that mandate and sort of taking the company on the digital transformation, our so we needed a security operation, we needed security frameworks, we needed something that we would have the expertise to do ourselves. And indeed, even if we had the funding to do that ourselves and set up and establish all of that security operations center, there is so much change and as threats and vulnerabilities change. Keeping on top of that as a smaller organization is just not feasible. So, having a great partner that would work with us. The threat landscape is truly global, and it's right down to that front line. And one thing that I've learned a lot over this last 18 months, the threat landscape has increased immensely. It's really around keeping those front lines safe, and a lot of that is around communication to that front line. So the way that Hugo now and the team work is we look after all of that monitoring, and you've done a lot of hard work there in terms of how you monitor and how we filtered some of those alerts now, so that only the real critical alerts are coming through to Hugo and his team 24/7. And Hugo's actually been able to spend a lot more time with our front line to actually train them on what email look like, how can you pick it up, why should you or should you not click on links that you might get in a text message. So again, it's sort of, this is information we give to our front lines, huge for us, but also they can take that into their personal lives as well. With their personal email, they can detect then potentially a threat email. So we're spending a lot more of our time sort of communicating and training our frontline teams, which hopefully makes us even more safe with you doing all of the monitoring in the background. So we had to go here. We really had to go here. Our security maturity was very low initially. We needed to improve that.
The one of the challenges we had up front was you had a very aggressive timeline to go live, and
yeah.
And knock on wood, today we were able to meet that timeline. But can you talk about one of the, I think, value propositions when you're looking at a service provider like us is the ability to ramp quickly, and you mentioned that at the beginning. Can you talk a little bit about that timeline and the aggressive nature of it, and what some of the decision process was that made it have to be moved so quickly?
Yeah, and I think from the moment that we did sign the contract, Shaheen, our teams worked very collaboratively together. I think jointly we agreed on a 30-day timeframe to go live. I think we all agree that that was pretty aggressive from both aspects, from my organization as well as yours.
Absolutely.
But we did. We worked collaboratively, and on day 30, we were live. Okay, there's still quite a bit of work that we need to do in terms of then learning and filtering alerts and putting some of the processes in place between the two groups. But we hit it through working collaboratively. And what can I say? Wow, be careful what you wish for, because once we flipped on that switch, the amount of data that we were then, that the data and your team was sharing with me and my team, it was quite overwhelming, shall we say. But having that data allowed us as two organizations to focus on what's really important. I think, if I reflect now on that last 18 months, aggressive rollout, working collaboratively together, it was the right decision to implement a security operations center with data and Endure. Hugo and the data and Endure team have done a great job. And I do have exposure through our audit committee into the board, and they are very keen to know what we're doing. So some of those statistics that I don't present those to the board, but I can share things with them that we've moved from what we think is a 30% maturity to right now to being at a 40% maturity, and we use a formal process to do that. And we're really on track for our journey of 50% maturity for the end of this year. I can confidently say that we're in a much healthier cybersecurity position than we ever have been, and we need to, given the digital footprint that we now have. I think what's really good testament to this, and this is probably the only stats I'll throw out, but this year alone, there's been 116 million events that we detected, the Security Operations Center have detected. 156 of those have required investigation, and only 2 of those have actually led to a confirmed incident, but both of which we jumped on quickly as a group, your team, my team. We caught both incidents early, and there had been no impact to the business or our data. It was a fantastic outcome. So we're very confident that we need to continue to evolve, and we need to make sure that we manage those vulnerabilities. We have seen a reduction by about 70% overall vulnerabilities that we had when we started 18 months ago to where we're at now, and we continue to stay on top of that as we move through, again, with that close working relationship. Yeah, I do positively think that had we not hired Hugo and joined you, and those two incidents that did get through could have may not have been as well maintained. It could have been pretty disastrous for us.
Yeah, it's been a pleasure working with your team. It's working with other practitioners in the space is really helpful for us, because it's easier to get from a identification and investigation of an incident to being able to really be able to respond to something and stop it in its tracks. We have a lot of this space, this managed security services space. The competition calls themselves SOC or SOC-as or managed SOC or MDR. There's all kinds of acronyms out there for what it is we try to accomplish. You mentioned two things in that last bit, that number one, when we started up, there was a influx of information, and one of the challenges that I think that we've had is we've gone into customers and we end up winning those relationships over, but we've gone in and they have a very bitter taste in their mouth from another player in the space, that they became a help desk triage of events, and that was it. So they saw the event, they sent it to the team, and the team had to really do the investigation and discovery. You mentioned something that I think is important. A lot of players won't do the proactive side. They just do the reactionary. I see events, I'm going to send them, there's a problem, without too much more thought than that. Some are better, some are worse, but generally speaking, that's what the space has become. When you talked about the influx of data in the beginning, we lovingly call it the honeymoon phase ourselves. It's the first 90 days we go live, and it's the number of events that get passed along are higher, but the intent of that honeymoon phase is to learn each other and learn your environment, and then fine tune it down to what are meaningful events. But also in parallel to that, the proactive side of what we offer is we do the penetration testing every month, and we do the continuous vulnerability assessment. And part of that is about, and what I love about what Hugo has been able to do is, as we give him those reports, we continuously see the vulnerability numbers coming down. And it's kind of like the here in the Bay Area, the Golden Gate Bridge is the biggest thing. And we see people all year long painting the Golden Gate Bridge. Part of the year they're going in one direction, and when they get to the end, they go back and they start again, and they're back at the beginning and coming all the way around. And patching and closing security gaps is just like that. It's a never-ending job, but what we try to do is we try to put in front of our customer teams the things that are most important to patch first. So prioritization and classification of, here's the biggest threats, here's the ones that the hackers are going to take advantage of first. And then in parallel to that, we also run the security controls validation, which is testing those controls to see if we use the tactic techniques and procedures that hackers do, would they be able to penetrate your environment? And can you talk a little bit about, how you talked about your maturity level coming to 50%, approaching 50%, but while tools and technologies are a part of that painting of the bridge is a significant part of that. Can you talk a little bit about what we've been able to help in that space to help you close those gaps, if you will?
Yeah, it's an interesting one, because I do believe that security operating, while we refer to it as a security operations center, it's not a center, it's the process. It's the heartbeat that sits behind those alerts, and then the process that you follow. It's okay detecting a threat, but what then do you do with that threat? And as you said, how do you manage it? Some of those players just hand it over the fence to my team and then deal with it ourselves. Now, we have a lot more proactive relationship with you there, where we do that filtering, you look into it, you give some first in, and then pass to us with some insight for our team. So I think it really is the benefit there is it shouldn't be viewed as a center, as a standalone unit, another department. It's a process, it's inherent, it's important, it's the heart of sort of that whole way that data traverses our in and out of our network. And for me, as you said, I mentioned we've decreased our vulnerabilities by 70%, but we always will have some vulnerabilities because patching is really, the vendor patches come out on a cycle. We can start to see that cycle now where our vulnerabilities go up a little bit every 3 months and then they drop back down again. But we, as you said, we make sure we have no critical, very few high vulnerabilities left. The majority are in the sort of the really low or the moderate that don't really pose too much of a security threat, but we know they're there and we'll get to them. But the critical and the high threats we deal with straight away. And of course, like you said, it's like painting the Golden Gate Bridge. It's a process. It's continuous service improvement to talk about it in sort of process management words, and that's what we have to continue to do. The sophistication of the threats that we're seeing out there now, and it's being pressed a lot now with some two very high-profile recent issues where malware was pushed out and ransom was paid. Right, we've got to avoid that. So we can't take our eye off that continuous service improvement across. Sort of painting, I like the analogy there of painting the Golden Gate Bridge. We just got to stay on top of it as much as we can.
It's also reminds me of hiking with my dad when I was young. We'd be hiking and he would say, I'd say, "Are we almost there?" And he'd say, "It's just around the bend." And we'd go around the bend, and then I'd say, "We went around the bend." He said, "Yes, just around the bend," and it was always another bend. And, it's out of sight, out of mind, I guess. But yeah, that's the patching is exactly the same story. Yeah. So Kirsten, you look like you're about to say something, and I'm monopolizing time.
That's all right.
Did I cut you off?
You didn't cut me off, but I was thinking. So you did see the wheels spinning. It's just been interesting hearing John talk. Just being in this space, of course, we hear a lot, we see a lot. You see a lot of statistics and data, and John, what you've been able to do within RAC is, I think, what so many leaders like you are trying to do, that, you spent all this money on tools. In theory, the tools you've bought are working, yet surveys will say over 50% of leaders like you are uncertain whether what you're doing is really going to hold up when push comes to shove. And so what you've been able to implement between your third-party relationships, like a Data Endure, and having very strong people, you're able to test and affirm on an ongoing basis that what you have is working. So it's not kind of the, yep, I went out and bought the tools and hopefully they stand up when something happens. You've got the insight and the intelligence to tell you. And like you said, the things that you're going to set aside and say, nope, not important yet. But, having help finding those needles in the haystack, bringing you down from millions to hundreds to 2, right? That value, that time value, and that focus value for your team, I think you've been able to implement what so many people would hope to, yet they're not quite there yet.
Yeah, it's really important to link, as we said, the people with the process and the system. So I call you there in terms of our process being the security operations center. Now there's technology, there's people behind that as well. But that process, it then translates into our people. I'm not talking about my IT team, I'm talking about the business. That awareness of how they can limit those number of threats or vulnerabilities is really important. That's where Hugo and his team sort of focus on that. And yes, Hugo does have a number of other tools and systems that's in place that sit alongside the security operations center to keep us all secure. So yeah, I'm a real sort of proponent that it shouldn't be just considered as a vendor relationship or a center that sits over there. It's actually embedded in the DNA of what the business is, and with Data Endure, we've got that now, working with Hugo across our people and our other systems that keep us safe every day.
Mm-hmm. So John,
I gotta say those berries behind you are making me hungry.
Yeah, they look very good.
They do. Sorry, Kirsten.
I was just going to ask John, you've had a great deal of experience both at RAC and elsewhere. As we start to close down our time together, what would you share if you had one piece of advice or insight? You've got likely some of your peers listening to this segment. What would you share as a piece of advice or takeaway?
I think it's very short and sweet. Two dot points or 2 cents. is if you're not already on a cybersecurity journey, you probably with the number of threats, vulnerabilities that's out there, it's only a matter of time now before we see the hackers are moving from those big financial organizations to pretty much anybody that's out there. There's ransom to be paid from anybody, right? Data is critical moving forward. So if you're not on that journey, you probably need to rethink your strategy there and start on that journey. And for those that are on the journey, as we have been, there was a big wow moment for us when we got those first reports through. So if you are on that journey, don't be afraid. Be ready for those inevitable surprises, but use that data, use that wealth of learning, as we did with our relationship to really quickly move from that maturity. We moved from 30 to 40 really quickly. And then we're now plotting that journey to 50 and indeed 60% for next year by just small incremental pieces of work now, which take a little bit longer. And that's their sort of collaboration, communication with our people within the organization to how they can help keep us safe. So yeah, you should be if you're not on the journey. And once you are on the journey, don't be afraid of all that data that comes in. There's a lot you can do with that to make sure that, that your people and your data are safe.
John, I think there's something that I'd like to tease back a little bit. You've mentioned the maturity level, the percentage of maturity you feel you're at today. And to your peers listening, I think it's important to tease that back because when somebody hears 30% maturity, they think unprotected, and I think you have never been, in the whole time we've met, even from the beginning, unprotected. You had, as Kirsten said, you had the tools, technologies, services. Can you talk a little bit about, when you say maturity, what you mean specifically? Because you've hinted at it throughout the conversation, but I think to be a little more explicit. So what I don't want folks listening to feel is that, you know what, I don't have all the tools I need, but he started at 30, so I'm okay.
Yeah, and it's about that journey, and it's about the risk that your business is prepared to take as well. So we have a heat map that we present again to our board. Hugo introduced the NIST, the National Institute of Standards and Technology, into RAC, and we use that really as our framework or governance model in effect. And so they split it into 5 areas, and that's identify, protect, detect, respond, and recover. So we're able to measure our maturity against each of those 5 pillars, and there's various elements that stick in those 5 pillars. So there's governance at one end, and policies, and at the other end is just the day-to-day operations. But certainly in terms of respond and recover, it's the less sexy part. It's where you put in your business impact analysis, you look at your business continuity. The real fun bit is the bit that we do with you. It's about that identify, protect, and detect. So we get all of those millions of alerts and what's actually going to hurt us, and how do we get the engineers on and dealing with that together. That's the fun stuff, right? But right. It covers the whole spectrum, and we have still an 18-month plan that was yet to deliver that we've committed to. And of course, that 18 months will then turn into another 18 months and another 18 months. We're doing it in small bite-sized chunks that's looking at the risk appetite of our business, tying that into sort of that capital investment or investment that we need to achieve those outcomes, and then how can we deliver that as an ongoing practice within RAC and with our partners.
So for our listeners, I hear you saying is that it is less about the tools and technologies, although some of the standards explicitly say, some of the controls explicitly say you should have endpoint security, you should have log aggregation, you should have, those are the simple ones. But this maturity level you're talking about is much more about the processes and procedures and the evaluation of the things that you have implemented.
Yeah, absolutely. That's exactly right. And then it's good we every 6 months, which is why I know we're 30, 40, we're on our track 50. We actually go there and audit it ourselves. So we do it internally, and then at the end of the year, we get someone else to come in and audit to confirm that we have reached where we hope to or not. We take it really seriously. It's a really important part of the whole business, not just of IT.
Thank you for that. Yeah, I couldn't agree more.
Say pretty remarkable that all of that needs to go into growing and delivering berries, right?
Yeah.
I mean, did the Reiter family ever think 150 years ago that this would be something that they would have to be able to figure out how to do well in their organization?
Probably not then, but they're heavily involved in the business on a day-to-day basis. So they were pivotal in signing off the strategy that I derived with the business when I first started, and they were very, very happy to support the for us significant investment in this cyber area. So no, I don't think in 1868 they would have envisaged this, but certainly with some of the tools and technology that we've used to help automate that whole efficient process from actually, it's a manual process. We hand pick all those berries. There's no way around that. We try to do something with not technology, but a big tool there that can actually shape the blueberries, for example. The blueberry trees, and the blueberries drop off, you will lose quality. So for those in the supermarkets, we don't do that. They're all hand picked. So that's really expensive to do. So we need to make sure that as they're picked, the rest of it is as automated and efficient as possible. Technology is playing a lot bigger role than it ever has now.
Absolutely. It's fascinating.
Back in the 1800s, ransomware meant something entirely different, I think.
Yeah, a lot more scary, I think.
Yes,
Well,
indeed.
John, we thank you so much for joining us today. It's just great having you. It's great hearing your story, and of course, we absolutely love your company and your product. So, so thank you.
For breakfast, lunch, and dinner.
I appreciate the opportunity to chat to you like this.
Okay, and thanks to all of you for viewing, and we will see you again next month. Thank you.